Hello, welcome to SessionWell. My name is Adam Luke.
I'm Judy Yen.
And this is the SessionWell podcast. What the SessionWell podcast is a place for you to come, whether you're a pre-licensed clinician, licensed clinician, or an everyday Joe or Jane. We want to be able to talk about the interventions we use as mental health clinicians and also the stuff that we can use as regular people.
Thank you so much for joining us, and as always, thanks to my brother Fred Yen with Cura Studios for taking care of all of our marketing needs. If you ever need anything to do with websites, promo videos, or client lead generations, he's the guy to call.
So you're probably wondering who this amazing person is. Super stoked to have her on the podcast because it is our first forensic clinical psychologist. Did I say it right?
Clinical forensic psychologist, but you're really close, and I don't think it really matters.
Well, I want to make sure that we introduce you correctly. So who are you?
My name is Dr. Nicole Caceres. I am a clinical forensic psychologist. I work currently for the County of Orange. I work for the Conditional Release Program, which is a small program that works with those who have serious mental illness and have committed some type of crime. And now they are in the state hospital, and so we go in and evaluate them and determine whether they are appropriate to come out to the community for treatment or whether they should stay where they are at currently.
And you have a private practice.
I just started my own private practice. I'm going to be focusing on individuals who need help with some form of a psychotic disorder. Also doing some psychological testing to help to determine what kind of diagnosis you may have. Maybe someone is a little bit on the borderline of anxiety or depression, or maybe they might have some type of hallucinations that might be OCD related, things like that. Just trying to help determine what is really going on underlying everything. Treatment maybe hasn't done so well for you, things of that nature. And I also will be doing forensic evaluations. So for people who have upcoming trial or are involved in a case and the lawyers think, this person's a little too mentally ill or has something going on where I can't work with them. They can't help me with their case. So what that's called is a competency evaluation. So I'd be able to go in and help the lawyers determine this person probably is not mentally sane at this time, so maybe moving forward with the case is not appropriate.
Okay.
Interesting.
And so then they go and get treatment and until they are better, until they're treated and they get better so that they can help their lawyer, or they don't really ever get better because you do have a choice on whether to take medications or not. So then they get referred to what we call as a conservatorship.
Okay.
And then the conservatorship will go out there and evaluate them to see if they do need assistance in making their own decisions or not.
Okay. And so what led you into this field? Because most of our guests have been MFTs, so you're kind of like our first clinical forensic psychologist. What led you to go that path rather than a different psychology license?
Sure. So abnormal psychology started when we all got taught about Anne Frank in the 6th grade and about Hitler and genocide and the Holocaust. And from there, my brain just kind of went rampant, and my mom would drop me off at Barnes and Nobles, and I would just go through all I went through Mein Kampf and all of the stuff about Hitler and how he did have some form of a mental illness. At some point when he was in World War I, he actually had some form of a somatization disorder where he was not physically blind, but he did go blind, and he spent some time in a mental institution. So from all of that, I went into, there's some mental illness, and people were following this man who had a severe mental illness at some point. The man was also a psychopath as well. But then I went into other genocides like Pol Pot and the African apartheid and all these different people who had some form of mental illness and violence, right? And so then I took a class in high school for abnormal psychology, and from there I kind of just...
You were locked in.
Yes. And I've had family that have been institutionalized or incarcerated as well. So I think there was a part of me inside that wanted to know why people acted that way as well. So it started very young.
Were your mom like, oh my gosh, why is my child so fascinated?
No, I never really asked her that question. I'm sure she was a little scared. But God.
Some light evening reading, Mom. Mein Kampf.
But I think, I wasn't getting where we lived. We didn't live in the greatest area, so I wasn't involved in gangs or anything like that. So I think she was like, as long as you're reading at Barnes & Noble, it's okay.
I will drive you to Barnes & Noble all day long. Very good.
So that's where that, and then as I grew, I kind of wanted to, everybody wants to go and study serial killers,
Right.
And so then that's where the forensic psychology piece came about. And then I learned studying serial killers is a lot harder than you'll ever get to. You have to be someone way high up there to even touch one, to even come in.
So then what is your, I don't know if it's like your everyday, but then what population do you normally, like if it's not the serial killers, then what population are you seeing?
So I see mostly people with diagnosis of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder with psychosis, schizoaffective disorder, and we do have some who have depression with psychotic features, which is pretty rare, but we do have that as well. So those are, every single person that I've seen has some form of a psychotic disorder on a daily basis, and that's what my court evaluations do revolve around.
And what does that look like? I mean, like, people that aren't in the field, like, what is a psychotic disorder? Like, what would that even look like?
So it's a mental disorder that has someone that it disturbs their thoughts, feelings, emotions, and perceptions of reality. So they may hear voices, they may have delusions, they also have, they also will have motor issues. So there's like catatonia, things like that, or they may have childlike behaviors, things of that nature. And then we have, there's 5 different features of someone who has schizophrenia. So like we said, the delusions are fixed delusions usually. It's something that you can present them all the evidence in the world and they still
sky's still orange.
Just like someone who believes in God and is a true believer in God, and say you presented them some other evidence in light that he is not real, you're not going to change that person's belief system. It's very difficult. Even treated with medication, solutions are usually the last to go. They stay fixed for quite some time.
Like a hyper rigidity to it, right?
Absolutely. So then you've got the other part is the hallucinations, which could be vision and auditory, mostly auditory. It could be someone that you know, someone you don't know. It is usually always outside of your head. So it's literally like someone were to be whispering to you right now as we're speaking.
I've also heard, like, I don't know if this is like just a myth, but I've heard that they're usually male.
No.
Okay, it's not gender specific.
It's not. A lot of them will heal demons or God. Most of the time, religious things seem to be very involved with the psychotic disorders for some reason. I'd really like to know more about that. I don't think science has really pinpointed why it is. I know that there's certain parts of the brain that do correlate with the activity of schizophrenia and religiosity. So that would be something to look into as well. But they also have, very, very rarely, they have olfactory. They can smell things that aren't there. But that's usually due to a traumatic brain injury. But yes, so for instance, a very interesting delusion that a man who's been in the hospital, he killed his sister in not very nice ways. And he believed that she was after him and that she was going to overtake his body. Well, anyways, when I go and visit him, he truly believes that his mother lives in the iris of his eye.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, your mom doesn't live in your eye. And I said, no, my mom doesn't live in my eye. Are you sure? Because she lives in mine and I hear her every day. I mean, those are the true, beliefs. And he's not only suffering from hallucinations, but also delusions at that point.
And I mean, especially when we look at the fact that for that person, that is real life.
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes, especially when we're talking amongst friends or even other professionals, there seems to be such a dismissive quality to it. And while, yes, it is a delusion, for them it's very real.
Yes.
Because I've watched, again, from like working with individuals from substance abuse and alcohol, that, their emotions are 100% on. So you can have a person sitting there just completely deteriorating emotionally because this hallucination or cognition for them is 100% real.
Absolutely.
And it's humbling to be in that position, to sit there and be like, wow, this thought process is so real. They truly believe that their life is at stake or their safety is at stake.
Right.
Yes.
So how then do you do reality testing with them, or do you just kind of let them embrace those delusions?
It really depends.
Okay.
Sometimes the delusions are so fixed, and again, the people that I come in contact have committed some form of a crime or have been violent, which is not all of schizophrenia, which we'll get into. So it really depends. Sometimes you just go with the delusion and you let it keep going because I don't want to agitate them. I don't want them to want to harm me in some type of way because they're trying to prove. For instance, there's this man. He usually doesn't come and see us when he goes up. We have to see these people that are in the hospitals every 6 months because it is illegal to keep them there indefinitely. So we write our court reports and send them to court every 6 months to allow the court to understand where this person is in the process. Anyway, this person, this male, he hadn't seen us in years, and I was very surprised that he walked into that room. And given his history and how he behaves, he's pretty violent. So I was actually a little taken aback that he walked in there. But he does not believe who he is. He believes he's an absolutely different person. And he gave me a very, very interesting story on how, let's say his name was John Smith, but he believes he is Ben. Okay. And so he told me about how John Smith died and how Ben came to play. And he gave me a very elaborate story. And he's like, you believe me, right? And I told him, well, I believe that you believe this. Because how am I supposed to dispel and tell him that is not true when he truly believes it? And I wasn't going to agitate him either. And I wanted to know how he came to know that Ben was alive.
Right.
And it was a very interesting story in that John Smith came to the state hospital and he told me John Smith was did all these things, which is according to the chart record and his police report. He gave it really. But then he somehow had some split and decided that Ben was going to come alive while he was in the hospital. So Ben has no social security. He has no identification, never went to high school. He basically just took over the body of John Smith. It was very interesting to have him sit there and tell me all of this, and he truly, truly believes it. And he said, he even told me, he touched me, and I was a little taken aback. He's like, I love you, thank you. Thank you for listening to me. And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Even though I'm never going to change his mind, at least he really thought that I cared for him at that moment.
He's feeling heard, right? And sometimes that might have been the best therapeutic intervention he had that day.
Absolutely. Later, he asked for my name. I don't know what was going to happen with that.
Dr. C.
I might get letters in the mail later. But he felt heard in that moment. So.
Well, I'm excited to also move on to the conversation of how you wanted to bring sort of a face and humanity to this, right? Because we talk so much about the fringe of they're violent, or I'm dealing with courts and police reports, and to actually show that schizophrenia is something much larger than just that.
Absolutely.
It can't be pigeonholed just into violence.
Yes. I think there's a common misconception that violence and schizophrenia go hand in hand, and that is not true. It's actually quite the opposite. I just happen to work with that 10% of the schizophrenic population that does do some form of violence or crime. And it's difficult if someone were to come up to you and say, I have schizophrenia, what would be the first thing that came to your mind? I think an average American would be fearful of that person.
Absolutely.
And we already have stigma of depression,
Right.
laziness, anxiety, you just worry too much and things like that. And then bipolar, you're just up and down, right? And then you think of schizophrenia, oh, you hear voices and you're going to hurt me.
Yeah.
And that's not what it is. Yes, they do hear voices. Yes, it is a debilitating illness, but that person is still a person.
Absolutely.
And we need to be able to take that into consideration, and the more we are accepting of these diagnoses, the more those people will actually seek help. And I know there's families that will not speak about it,
Totally.
Absolutely.
you know.
Like ashamed.
Yes.
Or they keep that person hidden.
Absolutely, they'll keep them. Or, you know, people won't get jobs because of this. Or they feel that they'll never have a significant other because it is such a scary diagnosis, when it shouldn't have to be.
Yeah.
Right. Are there, I mean, like, just like in our textbooks and stuff, they always talk about how, like, more men are more susceptible or, like, a certain age. Like, have you seen that to be true? Or
Yes.
do you feel, okay.
It absolutely more men. The breaks are usually, if I can get this.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, of course. We love notes.
So as far as male and female, it's usually, according to the DSM, it's about 0.3 to 0.5% of the population suffers from schizophrenia, so less than 1%. When it comes to males, it is going to always be higher in males than females. Males usually will peak around early to late 20s, and females will be about late 20s. So there also has been, in my experience, more females who have had a break a little bit later in life, which is like 40s.
Okay.
Which I don't know if that has to do with, you know, early onset of menopause or what type of, you know, hormonal changes that has to come into contact. I had a female in while I was working at the Orange County Jail. She actually lit someone's fence on fire. And it's because she believed that she was going to allow the children to come alive out of this fence for somehow, however, her delusion helped her make that decision.
Right.
But that was very interesting as well when I was looking through the research. It is happening more often. Child onset schizophrenia is very, very, very rare, and should look into more of a, you know, brain tumors or things like that.
Because you always see not always, but like I've seen like the shows on like Oprah or something where they have, you know, child schizophrenia, but it's really not as common
Absolutely.
until like later.
Yes. So that's and then usually I think the latest is like late 30s is going to be what's happening. The difference between all the other diagnoses and schizophrenia is schizophrenia has something called the negative symptoms. It's something that you don't want. So things like diminished capacity for having pleasure, not being able to have like diminished speech output, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So those are not taking care of yourself, not wanting to take a shower, brush your teeth, because you're just either you don't have the physical energy or you're so inundated with your voices and hallucinations or your delusions that you don't care to take care of yourself at that point.
Or like flat affect too.
Flat affect too. They usually have that psychotic stare. I don't know if it's the medication or it's just like they just stare at you, they don't blink, and it's kind of scary if you're not used to it. But they'll just like stare at you like it's just a little. You can just kind of tell. And again, I don't know if it's medications or if it's the actual diagnosis.
Yeah. I've always wondered, because of the individuals I've worked with in residential drug and alcohol treatment, is with that stare or whatnot, it's almost as if when we're sharing the space, it's almost like that other individual doesn't know how to share space with another person. And so I actually had one explain it like that way. Like and sort of sharing that gaze, being like, what are you thinking about? And he's like, I don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was much more than just, I don't know you as a person. It's just, I don't, imagine sitting next to another creature that you're not really very sure of. And so how would you engage them? Mm-hmm. It's really, I'm trying to find out how I'm going to exist if I'm going to exist in your space. Mm-hmm. So
that's interesting. It's
very interesting, and it does bring, I have a large empathy for this population as well, because trying to be an advocate on the other side and find long-term housing, or trying to find a program that's going to be beneficial. Normally, what I struggle with is my beneficiaries are all very much treated as, textbook pieces of paper. Vignettes, essentially, is what I would say. Mm-hmm. So when I call a long-term housing, they say, well, what co-occurring symptoms are you seeing outside of just alcohol abuse or substance abuse? And then we have to talk about diagnosis. As soon as you say something like schizoaffective or schizophrenia, all of a sudden, maybe that 3 or 4 beds they had available is all of a sudden like, well, we can put you on a wait list. Whoa, but we have beds available. Right. Oh, well, but we only allocate so much for each, and it's not the truth. Mm-hmm. It's just all of a sudden, we'll call you back, and then it doesn't happen. And so then I have to take the same individual who struggles to function in structure, and I'm going to have to release them onto the street, which we know is not going to benefit them at all. Mm-hmm. And that's the scary thing, is when, I have an amazing supervisor who has had a long history of working in this field, and it's like, she's always told me, imagine if that was your husband, father, mother, daughter, sister. How would you treat that? Or would you treat them differently? And it really woke me up on the realization of like, well, yeah, I was attaching a lot of anxiety to just a diagnosis. Mm-hmm. When they are 100% a person first, and then they have a diagnosis. They are not their diagnosis.
Yes. And there are a lot of misconceptions too that you were talking about from the study that you had gathered. There's just like a lot of the common misconceptions.
Yes. And there is a lot of common misconceptions, and we at where I work at as well have that same issue with trying to house our individuals. Not only do they have the diagnosis, but they've also committed some type of crime. Yeah. So trying to house them, trying to get them out of the state hospital when they are ready to come out, and it's difficult for us to place them. Mm-hmm. And the places that are available aren't the nicest. Yeah. It's almost like you get punished for being mentally ill. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate part. These places are not kept up very nicely. You're paying $1,100 to $1,500 a month for very, very untaken care of facilities. Yeah. And unfortunately, you'd rather be out in a not so nice place than being stuck in a mental institution. So Absolutely. You'll take what you could get, and you can smoke cigarettes. So, right? Or you can get coffee whenever you want, because they don't allow caffeinated beverages in the hospitals. Mm-hmm. It interferes with their medications. Mm-hmm.
Or another step in that is also you have staff that's burned out, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's sometimes in trying to get individuals into certain housing situations, you realize that not only are the facilities run down, but so are the staff that are inside of them. And so when you walk in with that buzzword diagnosis, which the 3 that I go off of is, again, schizoaffective, schizophrenia, or bipolar. Mm-hmm. It seems like if I say any of those 3, all of a sudden it seems like the standard of care in the mind of the individuals that will be working with them switches. Like, oh, well, they're just not going to recover, or this is not something where we're going to actually think about this individual thriving with their condition. We're just going to maintain them. And that's scary. Because imagine if you had a child, or again, a brother or sister, and someone said, well, our treatment plan for them is just to keep them where they are. Right. How stoked would you be on that? Not very. You would be advocating for a higher level of care.
And there's a famous study too. I mean, I teach this to my students. Like one of the most like famous studies is, I think his name is David Rosenthal or something. Sorry, whoever you are. But it was called Being Sane in Insane Places. And so they basically had other people just pretend as if they had schizophrenia, and they went in with the diagnosis. And then when they got there, they didn't display any symptoms of schizophrenia, but yet the people that were working in there treated them very differently, simply because they had that label attached to them.
Yes.
And it's just crazy that so many years later, it's still happening.
What's scary about that particular study is the individuals couldn't actually get out of treatment.
Yes.
Because they just said, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're schizophrenic." Well, I don't have any symptoms. Well, we're not letting you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary.
It is very difficult. Once you get that label, it's almost like, you know, you put the scarlet letter on you.
Yeah.
And you might as well walk around with it. If you are in an institution, you do get treated differently, and you know, there's, again, the burnout doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so you have two separate hats. You have this hat of your day job, of what you're doing for the courts, and then you've talked to us briefly about your private practice work of wanting to be an advocate on the other side of the hat. So, in doing this from a private practice side, how are you looking forward to helping people thrive?
So I really hope to be able to be that clinician that maybe someone who's been fearful of coming forward and saying, you know, I do have some hallucinations, whether it be not just schizophrenia, but, you know, autism or OCD also have come with hallucinations or some form of delusions, especially OCD. You can have delusions of various things, you know, that it's usually that you're infested with some type of bugs or dirt or things like that. So I'm hoping to be able to offer that empathetic view and understanding in someone coming into my office and saying, this is what I have, and can you please help me? Let's do some reality testing. Let's go through this. Let's work through your delusions and hallucinations, and also with, you know, either bipolar disorder or things like that. A little bit on the more difficult side of the cases is what I'd like to be able to offer services to. Maybe they haven't been able to get help as they've needed, or it's just not available maybe in that area. And from what I've been told, it's not as much in the area that we've been offered.
Yeah.
Like I've tried to find referrals for people that you know, like that specialize in this population. There really isn't that many in Orange County, which is sad. You know, so having more people like you out in the field is amazing. Kind of what we talked about a bit earlier was just being a clinical forensic psychologist. It seems like you have to have a lot of like self-care or like a thick skin to work with this, not this population, but just to be a forensic psych. And so, do you feel like that's true, or?
Yes.
Okay.
You definitely have to be able to take yourself back and not take your work home. It's very easily, because I work in a specific part of forensic psychology where I deal with violence and mental illness, but there's also like, you know, child custody evaluations. And the people, I give my heart to them. I would never be able to do it, to be honest. It's not my cup of tea. But your life is at risk, definitely, when you start to do child custody evaluations, because you're messing with people's kids at that point. And I've had several professors that, you know, police officers have called them and let them know, you know, so-and-so's threatened your life, and just to let you know, we're trying to find them, and just don't go home and don't go to your office type of situation. So there's that part, and you know, you do read police reports, you see police photos, you see people in conditions in jail and in the state hospital that's not the nicest. And it's not to the fault of maybe the institution alone, it's just that person is difficult to treat, right? You see them in several instances of seclusion. Your nose gets a little bit, you learn how to deal with certain smells. Feces and urine. I've seen every part of the male anatomy that I didn't ever want to see. And those are things that you do have to be okay with. Like, oh, so-and-so's naked today, or masturbating in the corner, you know, or we're in front of everybody, you know, so those are the things that you can't be shocked to. I mean, at first you will be.
Absolutely.
And then on the other piece, there is certain people that I've come into contact that I clinically believe should not be in the state hospital, but got lucky and are there and are true psychopaths. And those people, you have to be really on your toes because they can manipulate you very easily. They're very charming. If you didn't see their police report and read their chart, you would think that they were an incredible person because they're smart, they're charismatic, they seem to have empathy, but they really don't.
Yeah.
So, yes, you definitely have to have thick skin to be in the forensic field.
Now, before you entered the forensic field, did you think you had thick enough skin, or was it something that has grown with you? What?
I think I did, coming from, I grew up in the ghetto and things of that nature, and so I already had that, but I definitely, it tacked on a couple inches since I've been
so you had moments where you were like, I'm not as tough as I thought I was.
Have you cried? I feel like if I was I would cry.
No, I don't cry all the time, but there's some instances where you just feel so heartbroken for either the victim or the person who happens to be the perpetrator, because they are so ill and they have no idea how ill they are, and so that's somewhat heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So what is the kind of the path like how many years of schooling is it? How do you get to kind of where you're at, where you have your full-time day job and then also private practice?
So I got my bachelor's degree at the University of Bern, and then my doctorate, I worked two years in the field, and then I went to Alliant International University for the California School of Forensic Psychology. And then I was there for 4 years, and I did my internship at the Orange County Jail, and a drug rehab, and then that's how I got into the county. So I think in total I've had almost 20 years of education, 20 years of education.
So does working in the prison system, is that usually kind of like the first, not internship, but is that usually where people go first, like in their training?
It really depends as far as the forensic field. So what happens is in your doctorate program, you start with practicums. So you go to practicum sites, and my first practicum site was at an institute for mentally disordered, whereas again, people were on conservatorship and they don't have charge of their own well-being in per se. So they're in a locked facility, but we got to take them out and take them to McDonald's and things like that. The ones that were okay to be able to do those things. Yeah. And then you do another practicum, and so you're kind of like trying out stuff, right? What is going to be your niche? And then I went and worked with sex offenders, and that's what I thought my niche was going to be, and then it didn't plan out to be that way. Yeah. It was a little too much for me. It's a very dark world, and I give it up to the clinicians who can stay in that world. It can be very, very difficult. And then I've always wanted to work in a jail, and so then I got my internship at the Orange County Jail, and then from the jail I transferred into basically I still work for the county, but I moved over to a small program called Conditional Release Program. So it was a step-by-step process. That's kind of how you get into the forensics. You try by the practicums and see where you want to fit.
So it's like a little bit like MFT, just
yes.
The different, you just try different niches and populations and you kind of figure out what.
And it sounds like, I've always said it, I feel like wherever you work in the mental health profession, your niche sort of chooses you. It sounds like you go around, then you find that one where you're the perfect key in that situation.
And sometimes we fight it.
Oh, absolutely. We don't want to go to whatever, and then we find that's where we do the best, right? This is where I was meant to be.
Right.
Yes, before I went into my doctorate program, I thought I wanted to work with kids. And then I worked at group homes and for young girls who were wards of the court, and I learned very quickly that I wanted to take them all home and keep them and make them better. And I cried more at that job than any other forensic job that I've ever had, and so then I learned very quickly that was not going to be something I can do, because I was so broken every day I went home.
Sustainability of that job is really rough.
Yes. I mean, when you have kids who have been promised by their parents that they're going to come and visit them, and then they don't, and then you have someone on top of the roof trying to kill themselves because mom didn't come and visit, it's just heartbreaking. So I mean, I've gotten assaulted at a group home more than I've ever even been touched at a jail.
Yeah.
The poor girl, we both had to go to the ER because she bit me and then she broke her arm. So we're sitting in the ER together. Because
we're going to continue billing.
I'm going to get this shot and right. Yes, she got a 4-hour therapy session with me. So, you learn what is going to be your niche.
Yeah. So I'm imagining maybe if we're lucky, someone is trying to find out how they can work alongside a family member or friend who maybe is just recently diagnosed as being schizophrenic or this diagnosis just come out. So how do we as individuals go alongside our family members, our friends, our loved ones, and help them? I imagine this is a resource that's difficult because, again, even if it is our sister or brother or whatever, when we hear that they have schizophrenia, all of a sudden maybe I am more reserved about them living at my house or being around my wife and kids. So how do we still be advocates and present for our family members or friends?
So I would say that NAMI is a great resource for being able to try to find out where you fit in this puzzle, whether it be that you're going to allow that person to live in your home or not, or try to get them help. Again, that person has to want help. And you got to remember, when you're first diagnosed with schizophrenia, everything that you're experiencing is real to you. I had a family member of a patient now who they literally drove her. She believed that the radio station was talking to her. And this was the very beginning of her psychosis. And so they literally drove her to the radio station to try to get her inside because she truly believed that. And so then at that point they really realized, okay, there's something really wrong, and they took her to the emergency room. But she still truly believed that that's what was going on, and she thought everybody else was crazy.
Yeah.
That how you guys don't understand, they're sending me messages. And she has been able to tell me back that, it's very difficult for someone to tell you that those things are not real.
Yeah.
The messages from the TV, or you're seeing like this piece of paper maybe is yellow, and now you're seeing it as like that's a sign that she's telling me such and such.
Yeah.
Those little things. So it's kind of like you kind of have to let them get the help on themselves, through however they want to do that. All you can do is be supportive and take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Because you can get caregiver burnout very fast. It's like taking care of a parent who has dementia or anything, right? So taking care of yourself is going to be number one. Finding resources, educating yourself about the diagnosis, and just doing those types of things and trying to help that person get assistance as well. And accepting of them, I think, and having empathy and compassion is probably number one, because they are probably more fearful of you, what you think of them, than you are of them.
Yeah. And I love the point that you make of also sort of accepting if the other individual doesn't want to accept help, right? Because we can so much take on that role in a way that's not going to be healthy for ourselves. If they are not going to accept help, they're not going to accept help. And it's not my lack of if I tried hard enough or if I wasn't a big enough advocate for them. If they don't accept it, that is on their side. That's, I'm always big on keep your side of the street clean, right? So you're doing your side, they have to do their side. And if they're not willing to accept help, that's not a failure as a family member or a friend or a loved one.
Yeah, not pushing them to the side or keeping them in the corner and not talking about it is not going to be helpful at all for anyone. You can't you can lock them up in a room if you really wanted to. That's illegal.
Yes.
But there are families that I've known to do that because they are fearful. They're doing it to protect that family member. They're not doing it out of spite or out of that they hate that person, but they're doing it because that's all they know. So again, that's where the education piece comes in, to be able to inform yourself of those things and get out and go to a NAMI group. That's going to be really important as well. Or see your own therapist.
isolation is not ever going to work from either side.
No.
So, especially when a lot of these individuals, when they first get that diagnosis, the immediate thing they feel is isolation. They feel as if they're alone. They're not able to have any help. And the idea of we're going to keep you away from more people is not actually going to at all help them learn to grow with this.
Yes, and we've had another case that comes to mind is there was a specific family that was not okay with their child's diagnosis, and so they didn't get him the help that he needed, and he grew increasingly paranoid, and unfortunately he did kill someone because he, maybe if they would have gotten him the help before, maybe he wouldn't have became violent. We don't know, but ignoring it and just leaving it to whatever it may be is not going to help.
Yeah, we should be providing them the tools, not withholding them from them, right? Regardless, they have to decide how they're going to use the tools, but the idea that we're going to keep someone in ignorance is not going to help them.
Right. So then if you had 3 takeaways for the audience about anything that we've talked about, what would they be?
Sure. You don't have to fear the person who's walking around talking to themselves, pushing a shopping cart. They're most likely not going to hurt you. They are in their own head and probably don't even know you exist.
Exactly.
To become educated before you start to, judge that other person. You don't know what it's like living in their mind, and become educated. And 3, take care of yourself. Really go get your own help as well. It's not a weakness to go get help.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Of course, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And so again, if people were trying to find you for your private practice, where would they find you?
I'm located in Santa Ana, and my phone number, should I say it?
Oh,
Sure,
please,
we'll have it
whatever.
down there too, but
Okay, my phone number is 714-406-4071, and then my email is dr.cacerespsyd@gmail.com. So it's dr.cacerespsyd@gmail.com.
Well, thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for joining us.
Yes, whether you're driving in to work or you're listening to us at home, thank you so much for always being a part of this. We appreciate it, and you guys have a wonderful day, evening, or a night.